that I've got the mold out, I've got the master out, I can reassemble the shell, I can lock in the tongue and grooves into the seams, press it all in, drill it all, put all the screws in, nice and tight, it's solid. Then it's time to cast. So what I did is I've been casting with, you guessed it, Smoothcast 320. And when I do that, I'm rotocasting it, all right? So that means I'm pouring it in. You got to remember the mold is all right now. And then I'm turning it. And I'm turning it. And I'm turning it. And I'm turning it. And I do that until the plastic has set enough that it will no longer slump. Now, Smoothcast 320, oh gosh, I'd have to check the numbers on it. I think it has a pot life of maybe 3 minutes, I think. But by pot life, that means when you should stop messing with it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to keep moving. So I would have to turn it by hand for 7 minutes probably. I did 2 applications of Smoothcast, so I wanted 2 thin coats rather than try to go for 1 all at once because I was worried I wouldn't get an even coverage. And I did find that it was harder to get into some of these corners in the back because of the way you rotate it. You've got to, right? Sometimes you got to tip it forward. Sometimes you got to tip it back, depending on which spot needs to be covered more evenly. I will say that these lips worked really, really well for holding in the rubber while I was casting. I spilled very little of it, but you will notice, let's see if that'll show, maybe right here, it is only about maybe a ½ inch, a little less, only in this spot. Everywhere else, it's about 1 inch wide on average. That little spot was the leak spot, and I had to really be careful when I was turning it towards that direction. So I'd rotate it, pour in another cup, rotate it. I used about 30 ounces total of Smoothcast 320 to fill this, to coat it. I did that in 2 rounds, basically. Then, so 2 rounds of 15, basically. And then I would do the foam coat, foam at 3, 2-part expanding foam, dump that in there, start turning that as well to build up a backing layer to keep the plastic, a little bit more, give it a little more strength. That's a lot of turning. That's a lot of turning for hand rotocasting. This weighs, it's no beast. I'd say it weighs 5, maybe 6 pounds, maybe 7. And then holding that and manually controlling its angle and tilt and rotating it as regularly as you can to get an even coat was no small feat. So I was pretty pleased when the first cast came out, and I'll show you that now. So this was the first cast that I pulled, and you can see the interior. I got in frame would help. I got a pretty good coverage, nice and even on that foam at 3. So I was pretty pleased with that. The thing, however, that became the constant challenge is actually then removing the rubber from the rock face. It is a time-consuming process, and you have to go very, very slowly, right? Especially because, if you remember, right, I've only got this little Y here, and I can't really access this side. So it's a trick for, I would say, difficult demolding with a soft rubber, is I would literally just lift it, but you got to be strong. You got to hold a lot of pressure on it, but not force it. And then listen like a safe cracker, and you'll hear it pulling away in every little nook and cranny. some areas would just open up nicely, but some were very, very difficult in these tight spots, and I wanted to give it time to ease itself out. I got exercise the last few weeks working on these from start to finish, you know. But it's a little rewarding when when you finally free it and you haven't really damaged the rubber and you get a nice good cast. So those are the positives. What would have been the negatives from these casts? First is that it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. My number one goal was to have good, clean, hard edges, good, clean, flat planes, so that when I set them down, I could push them up together and I'd get a nice, tight join between the two parts. I've done a lot of cleaning to get these back to the way they look right now. There's probably two problems. I'll just turn this one around for a second. So, make sure I'm framed. So you remember I had to cut, right, all of that rubber and remove it from about here down. When I did that, this area just gave a little delamination, just pulled away. Would go back, but it's not the same as when you first make that application. So this area, I think, is now a bowed area in the mold, and it doesn't quite paint. It doesn't quite sit right. So there's a chuck out here. The other thing, for some reason, I'm not entirely sure, the edges, this was the second cast, the edges are not entirely straight. And that I don't know, because the tongue and groove retention in the mother mold, as well as the clips on the, as well as my tape is showing, as well as the clips in the rubber to hold it into the mother mold, should be keeping that all under control. And still, it doesn't seem quite right, but again, that could be partly due to something weird happening from when I had to cut out the old rubber. So I guess this is, where I stop and I step back and I say, I'm going to be okay with this, because it's not bad. It's not bad. And the texture helps to, make that work overall. And I'll have to do a little puttying just to close up. I'd like to close up this gap up here in a couple spots, but that can be done. But if anybody who's been watching this so far understands this process, has done it, and has done it to replicate pieces that have tight tolerances, such that tiling these together, they line up every time perfect, I would love to know how to improve, because this is a very important mold making goal for me, and it's one I haven't quite gotten my finger on just yet. Although in this one I've made several improvements: the tongue and groove, the pin retention, the cheesecloth for stiffness. If I didn't mess up with the rubber midway through, maybe it would have happened to come out a little bit better. But in any case, there's the plea for help. If anybody, an expert mold maker, share a secret. And before we wrap up, I just want to see if I have missed anything. A couple quick comments on this then before we leave it. One option that I thought might work to fix some of this was to, this is what I've done with the Bragdon rock molds. If you haven't seen the Bragdon rock mold videos, they're in my review video playlist. It's where this comes from, is to heat this with a heat gun, right? Oh man, it's weird perspective here. Heat it, and then I could flex it, right, to bring it into alignment. No, that's not going to happen. The foam is too thick in some areas to be able to heat it, and it's not easy to control it in a precise enough way. So I had to go resort to sanding it, and that has been a lot of work. The other thing is that the mold is starting to puck. There are a few areas where little bits of rubber have been, coming off in the deepest nooks and crannies. That's happened with the latex molds I've used in the past, so it's not surprising to me, but it does show that, there are only going to be so many casts you can get out of this mold and still have, the highest quality possible. I only need it for 4, and I've already got 2, so I'm halfway there, and it's going to be all right, but that's just something I wanted to mention. And lastly, the first, now I've sanded them, I think, so I don't think you can even see them now. No. The first seam lines at these joints here in the back, the first mold, they were so clean. Maybe just, you could see them, but man, they were clean. Here's the last tip of the day for something to do that I didn't do when I started. When you put a release agent, you put release agent into your mold. These are urethane rubber molds, so you've got to really, this is not silicone. You've got to make sure they're greased up well. So, I thin sonite wax with a little bit of mineral spirits. Paint that all over there, do a double check, give it a quick spray. At the end of ease release, I think ease release 200, and that's, due diligence, that's great, all comes apart just fine, except the seams. I did not put release on the seams themselves, and so what happened is plastic went into the seams and started to fuse the seams back together. Not everywhere and not very badly, but I had to do some recutting, and I think the seams have never really lined up quite as nicely as I did that first time. So, tip, make sure when you're getting ready to put your release into your mold, before you put it in the mother mold, put it on the actual cuts of the seams, and then put it in, and then finish. Especially when it's a urethane rubber mold. So hopefully you were able to follow that exploration of that process. I guess if I had any apologies to offer, it's that the mold is just so big and so heavy, and it's so difficult to insert the mold into the mother shell and take it back out and do all that flipping around, which may have helped at some points in that discussion to help you visualize it. Hopefully you at least got enough to follow along, and if you've made similar styles of molds in the past, I'm sure you found it a little easier than some might have. So I made some notes here for some final thoughts. One is that at the end, I realized if I had done a cavity pour mold, it would have been so much faster. So I have a video of a cavity pour mold description. I'll put that link here. And basically it's, you put the master down, you put clay, then you build the shell, then you take the shell off, take the clay off, pour the rubber, put the shell back, put the rubber in. So you don't have to do a brush on. The only thing that the cavity pour technique would not allow me to do is it would not allow me to apply cheesecloth layers. I'm not sure they're helping though. So, because I still didn't get really good walls. So I think unless I need to do a brush on mold, I will be doing cavity pours from now on, because it probably would have been 1/10 of the time and probably 20% cheaper on the material cost. So this is the ugliest mold I've ever made. Here's a picture of what it looked like sort of partway through. I've never made a mold this ugly. It's not about the looks, it's about the function, but choosing green and brown as your two tint colors. But I did notice at the end, mixing up some extra, just a little bit to top it up. Same consistency before the other rubber had set, just to thicken the layer real quick. And when I drizzled it, I was like, oh, you get all sorts of streaking and patterns. I'm gonna make the next one colorful and attractive for no other reason than I have to look at it when I work with it. And I thought, next time I want to make it look nice. So never thought of putting art into the mold, but it really is an art form. You know, I've said it in the past about the relationships. If you want to have good casts, you have to have a good mold. And if you want to have a good mold, you have to have a good master. And you have to pay attention to those little details all the way through, which I didn't. As you well know, there were problems, so it can be challenging, and it's a little bit of a problem solving and how to tackle each piece, and it's rewarding when you get it right, or at least functional. But thinking about it as an art form and finally thinking, well, let's just go the whole way. If I'm gonna figure it all out, let's make it look attractive too. So next time, I should tint the smooth cast on the outside too. I thought I'd share with you before the battery runs out on this camera, really quickly, why the mold making was worth it. And just to give you a sense, to make the master, the big pink monster I showed you, it took me over 30 hours to make that. To make the mold, it took me over 50 hours to make that. But when I cast into it, each of the casts takes me 3.5 hours to get it in and out, and another hour now, which I shouldn't have to do, but I need to, 1 to 2 hours of cleaning it, sanding it, reshaping it. I'm gonna have to fill some spots and all that. So without the mold, I'd be in for, 130 hours to do the 4 pieces. With the mold, I'm looking at, say, 70, maybe 80 hours max, and $100 in materials. So that's saving me a lot of time, 60 hours, right? Possibly. So it just goes to show the value, even for a very short run. I'm only doing 4 pieces. I don't know, we'll see how the mold is doing and how much I hate it by the end, if I'll ever do any extras, maybe. So there are some thoughts on mold making, a little overview of how I've been using some of the Smooth On products, which ones to get this process done, some do's and some don'ts, and again, just an extension to anyone out there. If you have tips and tricks, I love them. I'll always listen, and hopefully if you're interested in mold making, you found some of this helpful, and though this may be a large and sort of complicated mold, all of the processes that I've discussed are applicable to any kind of a mold other than, say, like, a one part, pour and demold, so anyway, I'm sure some snippet of this was helpful to somebody out there, but hopefully you enjoyed at least seeing the kind of maniacal processes I try to undertake when I complete a large project like the ocean boards, and you're probably going to see more kinds of stuff like this in the future coming from me as I move more towards single one-off projects. Oh, I dropped my notes. So stay tuned to the channel, because I will be doing a very, very short video on what I learned about mixing urethane, so you don't have to cut half of your mold away in the middle of the process. Lessons learned. So I'm going to do a little video on that. Be like a 5-minute video probably. And I also want to do a short video on how I'm storing all of my materials. Urethanes, they don't like moisture. I got a quick, simple, easy system, and I'll shoot a short video of that. And lastly, I have been writing monthly columns on my Patreon site, campaign, whatever they call it. My patrons request a topic, and I write one each month. I try to be thorough, you know me, and they're open to the public though, and what I've done is they're getting hard to find, so I have created a post that has links to all of the older ones, and as I add more and it drops down, I'll put a new post up with the count, with the links, and then, you know, whatever recent ones I've added since then. So the last two have been on buildings. One was on thoughts on building buildings, and one I wrote was on aesthetics, how to make your buildings look nicer. And I learned from myself, because I was doing some drawings of buildings, and I realized I didn't put in the things in my drawings that I said you should have. Right. Anyway, it's good for me sometimes to think out loud, so I'll hear it too. So, you know, if you're interested, the link to Patreon is down below. It's in the activity feed, and that will get you there. Scroll down a little bit, and you'll see it's a public post, and it'll have links to all of the different articles I've written so far. So, this was a doozy. I tried really hard to prep for it, and I hope it sounded organized. And I thank you for joining me, especially if you watched all the way through. And if you are a new subscriber, welcome to the channel. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I have something that you will find useful. And of course, I'm always willing to try to help out. So if you have questions and comments, leave them down below. And stay tuned to the channel, because I've got at least 2 short videos I got to shoot right away, but there will be other videos that I will be coming back to you with. That's the kind of ending you get when it is late. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.